Hello, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining this session of EduBrite University webinar series. Today's topic is 21 CFR Part 11, which is a regulation needed in several industries, compliance of that regulation. And today's session will focus on how EduBrite LMS or any LMS can help you in that compliance. So the presenters of today's session will be myself. I'm the moderator, Ajay Upadhyay, and the two presenters are my colleagues, Brian Rush and Manish Gupta. Some housekeeping rules. So as always, feel free to post your questions in the chat box anytime during the session. And you can always find all these Q&As in our communities, and you can later post these questions in the communities as well. To go to the community, you can just visit support.edubrite.com or university.edubrite.com. So with this, I'll hand over to Brian. Brian, you can start with the presentation.
Thank you, Ajay. So for the agenda, one of the first things we'll have to do is say, what is 21 CFR Part 11? It's a big animal, so we have a lot to cover, but it's also very open to interpretation. So we're going to have to explore this in a number of different aspects. And then we're going to see how that relates to learning management systems compliance with the regulations. And then what's involved in validating the system, a validation from a FDA perspective, making sure that it meets all of the 21 CFR Part 11 requirements. And then I'm going to pass it over to Manish for a demonstration. And then we'll wrap it up with a conclusion and questions and answers. So 21 CFR Part 11 affects a number of heavily regulated industries. It covers compliance requirements for them, including pharmaceutical companies, biotech and biologics, life science companies, medical device and medical manufacturing, and some other FDA regulated industries. There's a virtual alphabet soup of acronyms and regulations in these industries and in the regulations, and it can be a bit overwhelming to navigate. So let's make some order from this chaos. We've got all of these different terms to understand, but if we put it in some kind of order here, the FDA's 21 CFR Part 11 contains the requirements to ensure the authenticity and integrity of electronic records and electronic signatures, but it does not stipulate which electronic records need to be generated or e-signed. This is where the predicate rules come into play in the form of the GXP regulations, the X being the variable there for the other ones such as M and L and C as you're seeing here. And we're going to talk about those in detail on one of the next slides. Relatedly, the International Council for Harmonization of Technical Requirements for Pharmaceuticals for Human Use, the ICH, is an international organization that brings together the pharmaceutical industry and the associated regulatory authorities to create guidelines and training programs, ensuring consistency in interpreting regulations. So you can see there's the PQS or Pharmaceutical Quality System that's loosely based on the International Standards Organization 9000 principles. So that explains some of our acronym soup there, but we'll talk about some more of them in a minute here. So 21 CFR Part 11 was first published in March of 1997 and became effective as of August of that year, 97. It has impacted computerized systems more than any other regulation. The main requirement of the 21 CFR Part 11 framework is to ensure that any computerized system used for regulatory purposes produces electronic records that have authenticity, integrity, and reliability, and that electronic signatures are valid, irrefutable, and an acceptable substitute for handwritten signatures executed on paper records. It consists of 3 sections. Subpart A is general provisions define the scope and the details for the implementation and establish a defined nomenclature for use throughout the rest of the document. Subpart B relates to electronic records and focuses on the controls for closed systems, as well as signature manifestations and signature record linking. And then subpart C is the area pertaining to the requirements for electronic signatures, and it controls the controls for identification, authentication, and the codes and passwords. So we mentioned on the one slide GXP with the X variable there. There's a number of good regulations that FDA has that are associated with 21 CFR Part 11 for further guidance based on the industry. Good manufacturing practice, or GMP, sometimes called current or CGMP, regulations exist to control the quality of manufactured goods. While GMP requirements provide enough flexibility for the manufacturer to choose how they implement the necessary controls, all GMP protocols rely on rigorously tested scientific principles and require strict quality management, including the use of good quality raw materials and the ability to detect any deviations in product quality. Good laboratory practice, or GLP, is intended to ensure the trustworthiness of laboratory data by regulating those processes and conditions under which clinical and non-clinical research is conducted, including the governance of how research facilities shall be maintained. And then we have good clinical practice, which is intended to ensure the safety of trial participants. Its guidelines are dictated by the International Conference on Harmonization, the ICH we spoke of earlier, and govern the ethical and scientific quality of clinical trials. It covers things such as the study design, methodology, as well as the data collection and reporting related to clinical trials. Each of these GXP regulations mandates that those employees who are involved in performing any regulatory activities must have the appropriate combined knowledge, training, and experience according to their job qualification in order to be able to satisfactorily perform their assigned duties in the workplace. Therefore, training records are highly likely to be reviewed and audited during an inspection. These can include course completions, attendance records, and assessment results, among others. A predicate rule is any FDA regulation that requires companies to maintain certain records and submit information to the agency as part of compliance. The agency is generically known as the FDA, but anytime you hear the agency, that's what they're talking about, and that's throughout the document. Other parts of 21 CFR with similar regulations to the Part 11 relating to training record management exist, including Part 820. These requirements are meant to ensure that medical devices are safe and effective. Part 58 is for GLP, for non-clinical laboratory studies. And then Part 211, this is where records shall be maintained for all components, drug product containers, closures, and labeling for at least 1 year after the expiration date. So that's the finished pharmaceuticals aspect of it. So all of these, while not part of Part 11, are applicable to training records as well, and something that these industries should consider as well. According to the FDA, an electronic signature means a computer data compilation of any symbol or series of symbols executed, adopted, or authorized by an individual to be the legally binding equivalent of the individual's handwritten signature. Certain signatures are required, and if executed electronically, require compliance. By extension, the use of electronic signatures implicitly indicates that a system is an electronic record system and must therefore be in compliance with all provisions of 21 CFR Part 11. Electronic signatures must be forever linked to their respective records and must include the printed name of the signer, the date and time of the signature, and the meaning of the signature, how it applies in that context. In regulated industries, one must be able to demonstrate that thorough and secure procedures are in place and to assure the auditors that training programs are adhered to and completed entirely. SOPs are controlled documents and the basis for training measures, standards for operations, and employee accountability, and need to be signed off on in regulated industries. E-signatures are key to capturing the learner's acknowledgement of having read and understood standard operating procedures. As SOPs evolve, any successive revisions of them that supersede it need to be signed off on as well. Some LMSs also serve as a document repository, while in some organizations with policy management, the official control document may reside in a document control system or quality management system, and a copy of the SOP can be signed off on within the LMS by the learner as having been trained on and agreeing to abide by that procedure. No solution is compliant in and of itself. The FDA does not approve any LMS, and you can't actually purchase a 21 CFR Part 11 compliant application off the shelf out of the box. The LMS is only the tool that the organization uses to comply with the regulations and greatly facilitates compliance, but that is only one component. Its technology and what relevant feature sets it affords, along with the flexibility of configurations, are what makes an LMS a good choice or candidate for a highly regulated organization. For example, the system can facilitate FDA training record inspections by providing accurate real-time reports and providing audit trail monitoring or capturing e-signatures or attendance marking. However, the organization's policies and processes in the management of training records greatly influence the success of compliance. This includes system settings, authenticity verification, and adherence to procedures. So Part 11 compliance is determined by both the customer's procedural controls as well as any system intrinsic capabilities provided by the vendor. Let's take attendance records as an example. The LMS has provisions for the instructor to take attendance, and mark off those present and absent in the system. Alternatively, it also affords the instructor the option to print sign-in sheets for attendees to execute their signature on paper. But what if the class is too large for attendance taking? Or what if someone comes in late? What if the employee ID badge has a QR code on it and attendance is recorded via a QR code reader at the door where there's a human monitor to validate the ID belongs to the attendee? The software and hardware technology is only one piece of it and can only do so much. There needs to be a balance of risk, practicality, security, and enforceability. Perhaps for higher stakes classes, the policy for an ILT class dictates a relatively small learner to instructor ratio in a smaller venue. While individuals must be held accountable and responsible for actions pertaining to their e-signatures to prevent record and signature falsification, it is up to the organization to validate that the system can provide the means necessary to support the implementation of these necessary policies and procedures that the organization decides to mandate. Real-time data is important so that you can be prepared to show your compliance numbers to auditors at any given moment and know that it is current and robust and accurate reporting is key. As training records are reviewed in almost all inspections, significant time can be spent checking that records are current and abide by the applicable SOPs. Time and effort spent retrieving and checking the records can be unnecessary reactive administrative work that could be allocated to more productive and proactive duties. You must also be able to create your own ad hoc reports on the fly so that you have access to any combination of data which auditors may ask for outside of the canned reports that the system provides. This can involve multi-table queries with complex joins, for example, so having full access to data is very important. Another key requirement is to be able to schedule automated reports that are pushed to managers' inboxes on their direct reports or their personnel, including their current and upcoming expirations. Computer system validation. We mentioned that on one of the opening slides. The objective of validation is to produce documented evidence that the system will work correctly every time for its planned lifespan. Computer system validation first requires the creation of a validation master plan, which documents the requirements and scope of the system, the risk assessment and justification, and the validation effort itself. It also defines roles and responsibilities, along with the most important part, the acceptance criteria. The execution of the valid confirmation by examination and provision of objective evidence that software specifications conform to user needs and intended users, and that the particular requirements implemented through software can be consistently fulfilled is one of the general principles of the software validation final guidance for industry and FDA staff documentation. Validation is not standard across industries, and differs amongst customers who have varied risk tolerances, but it is safe to say that it usually requires highly detailed documentation. This documentation is time-consuming to produce and can last from 3 to 6 months. For larger enterprises, validation is usually a collaborative effort among several departments, including quality, IT, and HR/L&D. IT must address things like the security of the system and whether to have it reside on-premise or in the cloud, as well as implementing policies such as password strength and its lifespans. Also, security must be assessed in how tightly the LMS integrates with other applications, such as the enterprise's HR information systems, or single sign-on, or any other applications, such as Salesforce, if that's necessary. For smaller companies, the initial deployment and validation of regulated software can be a monumental process, exceeding the bandwidth and capabilities of the available internal resources. Managed services support options, and qualification outsourcing can be done with third-party providers offering consulting services or even infrastructure as a service solutions to manage the qualification process, or platform as a service if there is not a qualified IT person to manage a validated system. Within validation, verification is the testing of the software for consistency, accuracy, and completeness, and that its supporting documentation, including SOPs and training materials, ensure the same. It confirms all actions within the validation process and includes the review and approval of the specifications, formal design reviews, any necessary code walkthroughs, testing, and the preparation of the validation report in order to confirm that all of the validation activities were successfully completed and the acceptance criteria were satisfied. The qualification, this is formal testing to demonstrate that the software meets its specified requirements. The verification process also encompasses 3 qualification tests. Installation quality test, which confirms that the software is properly installed and set up as per the design spec, usually within a testing or validation environment. The operational qualification test, which is testing against the functional specifications and assuring that everything works properly with no bugs. And then performance qualification test. This is essentially user acceptance testing, which confirms that the software will meet the defined user needs according to the user requirements specification. And then there's process validation as well. The FDA defines process validation as established documented evidence, which provides a high degree of assurance that a specific process will consistently produce a product meeting its predetermined specifications and quality attributes. Process validation indicates that a process has been subject to intense scrutiny and that the outcome of the process can be, for all intents and purposes, guaranteed. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Manish, who's going to give a demonstration of EduBrite and how its workings apply to what we've talked about thus far.
Thank you very much, Brian. Appreciate a wonderful overview of the FDA's 21 CFR Part 11 compliance, and thank you for talking about all the different aspects, including the procedural, process, administrative, technical. So what I'm going to do is, from EduBrite's perspective, I'm going to, let me share my screen here. I'm going to primarily focus and talk about, from the LMS perspective, what are the different things or basically the technical aspect as a vendor, what are some of the methods and provisions which we have provided that it can help you the keeping track of making sure that the records, the right securities are provided, the right tracking and audits are taking place. So the technical aspect of this is completely covered. So I'm going to start here with this. I have a couple of decks, and I'm going to switch between the system as well as deck just to make sure that I cover the points, as well as there are certain points I explain pretty well. So one of the most important aspect here is the safeguard or the security measure which a platform or LMS can provide. And I have broken down it into 2 sections. So the main goal essentially is that to prevent the unauthorized access and or provide the appropriate access. So first and fundamentally, you would need a secured credential, which becomes the basis for your electronic signature. So you'll have a user name, password, your name will be associated with it. So any training that user is completing then would have a track of the person who is basically taking the training, when they have taken, how much time they have spent, or any reminder notification that's to be sent. So that becomes a base for all the training happening for this particular user. In EduBrite, one of the wonderful things which we have is that all the users have a role and the permission controls are available based on that. So what do I mean by that? Let me just quickly go into next slide here. I'm not going to walk you through the different roles available here, but in EduBrite, roles are available at a different levels: the site level, the group level, the core session level, event level. This essentially allows as a LMS administrator or the team who is training their employees for the 21 CFR Part 11 compliance, they can make sure that the right learners are getting the right trainings. So some of the trainings can be contextual, some of the trainings can be repetitive, those kind of things. And this kind of a setup allows essentially to manage the and control what is relevant for them, assign them at the right time. So right people, right time, those are the important aspect there. Definitely, you need to have a very strong password policies. I have listed a few items related to having a strong password policy, but it's not limited to that. So you can control the length, complexity, the expiration. You can keep the history of password so that if you want users to basically have a new password after they change, put into a regulation, that can be there. You can have a lockout mechanism there, or in any case of any suspicion and all that, an email alert can notify the administrator. So what I'm going to do is, for this particular, I'm just going to quickly switch my view here to the platform, and let me just quickly go into the administrative view of the EduBrite LMS platform. So I'm using this particular site, and as I have logged in as the administrator in this site. So if you go into the site admin site detail area, one of the tab here is a security. It has a many security measures which are useful, but in this context, what we are talking about, essentially we are referring to these different password policies. So you have a full control in setting up these password policies as applicable to meet the requirements of this compliance, as well as your meeting your organizational needs. So you can see, you can set up the complexity here. There are a few methods available, that what kind of a complexity you would like password to have. You can keep the history. You can basically allow that how many password changes can be allowed in a day. So those kind of controls you can do to prevent any suspicious activity, and there's a notification capabilities are also available in addition to that. Going back here, another thing which is important is controlling the session. So the session control, the purpose here is essentially again the same, the preventing the unauthorized access, or making sure the right person is working on it, and if they are not working on what they're supposed to be working, then system automatically times out or logs out a user, that kind of a thing. So that is also available here. So essentially idle timer session, you can set up some time like a 15-minute, 30 minutes. If a user is not accessing the platform, then they automatically logs out of the LMS. In addition to that, we also have by just the design single session policy. What do I mean by that? Essentially is that if one user can log in and have one active session. So if the same user logs in from the other place, then it essentially logs out the user which has logged in into the other place. A good example of that could be that you may have logged in as on the Chrome browser, and then you can, on the same computer, if you open a Firefox and log in again, then it will log out the first user which was logged in in the Chrome. So essentially keeping one active session for one user also essentially meets this requirement. at macro level, when you start looking, so these are more from a user experience perspective, controlling an individual user's identity and making sure how they're interacting with the system, providing some safeguard measures there. But at a macro level, some of the controls that can be made available is restricting or allowing the IP access. So, for example, if you're an organization and pharmaceutical organization, and if you only allow your users to access the platform through certain areas, either their offices or some secured areas, then those IP can be whitelisted. So users can only log in once they are on those, essentially accessing through those IPs. So that kind of a control can be maintained. Allowing access based on a specific domains, that is also in case there's a need that you may have a multiple organizations or multiple sub companies, and every company would have their own domain. So you want to just, and if your name is using those companies' email domain, you can limit that nobody other than those domains would be allowed to log into the platform. So those kind of controls can be set up in the platform. In addition to that, some other security at a macro level essentially is a SSL certificate, all the communication happening over the HTTPS protocol, or having a secured hosted environment, or the LMS provider which is providing you the services using the GDPR, Privacy Shield, or SOC 2, those kind of compliances. And EduBrite essentially meets all these requirements pretty well. Moving on to the next slide, another thing which becomes very important is once you are inside a platform, you are working on creating the training content which are related to your 21 CFR Part 11 compliance, and then you're creating the tests, quizzes, exams, courses, programs, which is a learning path, and you're doing other setups in the platform. So is there a proper version control available? So in case there is a need to check what happened, what changed, those kind of mechanisms should be in place. So that way you know when the change was made, who made the change, those kind of things. So version control in EduBrite is available across the platform. So these are some of the examples I have listed, and I'm going to walk you through a couple of them also. So let me just switch my view here and go on to the, so right now I have opened some of the tabs based on the demonstration I was doing, so that way I don't go into the navigation, but in case you want to know, you can just go to the courses and find course. And right now I'm in the course editor view here, and in the course editor you would be able to see, for example, here a change log. So it shows you all the different version when this course was changed, and essentially the date and timestamp, version number, and the person who has changed it. I can go to the other area. For example, if I go to the course session, and if I go into the course session, I can also look at these the different versions of the course session here, again with the version number and the people who have changed and what date they have changed. In addition to the content, the version control on the content, there are other areas where the version control is also important. So for example, you organize your user, you put them into a group, and you are managing the training for that group. And if there are any changes happen related to the settings in that group, again, the group also has that version control. So essentially, the different units where you're managing your audience, you're managing your content or the collection of content, or the settings in the platform in order to deliver this group of users the training, all those places essentially we have a version control in place. So these are some other example, like if you have a CMS page, if you've created in EduBrite, or even if you have created some templates in EduBrite. So EduBrite supports you in order to basically repeat the same function. You can preset some templates so that you don't have to repeat the long list of a laundry list or operations. You can pre-create those templates, and those templates versions are also templates also carry different versions. Then I'm going to talk to you a little bit more on the compliance training part, that some of the interaction which platform can provide you that you can put in place from the end user experience perspective. And Brian has talked about them, that in certain places, if you're giving a training, we may require either a manual acknowledgement or a read and understand type of acknowledgement. You may even require them to have some sort of a agreement, acknowledging that agreement that they have. They understand what exactly training they are going through, or you can have some prerequisite setup, which basically allow you to force the order that there needs to be sequential learning, those kind of things. So what I'm going to do, go back to the LMS, and this time I'm going to change my view, and I'm going to show you this from the end user perspective, because these are all the measures that have been built from the user experience perspective. So I have logged in as a user, and I'm in a dashboard, and I'm looking at the course as a learner I'm enrolled into, and I'll just launch one of the course here. So the moment I launch a course, you can see in this particular course, and kind of an agreement is in place. So before you can start taking this course, you need to acknowledge it, accept this agreement before you can continue. So let me just accept it. The moment you accept it, then you would be able to see the course outline here. And then you can start taking the course here. So I'm just going to, before I start taking the course, I just want you to quickly walk through the course outline and talk a couple of points there. So you can see some of the items are mandatory here. So these are optional items, these are mandatory. The moment you see a mandatory item, you will see a locking available here. So this is a one way you can enforce the sequential learning, or the order you can force. The another thing which you can do is, for example, if I go inside this particular lesson, I can skip these because these are optional. And you can see in this particular lesson there are 3 pages. So if I start going through these pages, you can see this pops up or shows another option where this is basically validating the read and understand, where the platform is asking you to manually acknowledge that you understand whatever the content is provided to you as part of consuming this lesson. And once you acknowledge it, then only it will mark this lesson completed, and as an end user or a learner, you would be able to continue. So for example, if I acknowledge it, then you can see it automatically opens the next item, which is also a mandatory item. So if I just view that item, and then I would be able to continue with my learning here. So that's kind of a mechanism you can also use using EduBrite platform. So if you, so these are the these top 3-4 options which I talked to you are more applicable for a self-paced learning, but they can also be used, especially the first agreement can also be used with the instructor-led class. But in the instructor-led class, what can also be allowed, the attendance marking essentially is a functionality. So which an instructor can take the sign-up sheet, and then they can track the attendance who attended it, and then they can come back if it is a classroom training, and then they can mark the attendance. Or if it is a VILT, then the attendance of these learners who have participated, or the people who have enrolled and then who really joined those sessions from within the platform, they can essentially, their attendance can be marked. So in EduBrite, if you use a VILT, we support integration with variety of tools like WebEx, GoToTraining, GoToMeeting, Zoom, ReadyTalk, InExpo, those kind of things. And what it does essentially is it allows users to, once they are enrolled into those sessions, launch these sessions directly from within the platform. And that allows the automatic attendance tracking. But in case of a classroom training, instructor can go. So for example, if I go onto the view of instructor here, these are the different classes that are available. And for example, there are many people that are enrolled here. If I can go into one of the event, look at the list of a participant, you can see there is a signing sheet which this trainer or instructor can take. But once they come back, they can essentially go to the attendance area and they can mark the attendance. So if all people have attended, they can simply single click and save the attendance. But if some of the people have not shown up for the event, then they can essentially mark that they have not attended, and then they can save. And this goes into the record against this particular event. So you can see that. So that way it all these different activities which are happening in the self-paced learning or the instructor-led session essentially getting recorded in the platform. And that's where one of the auditing or tracking comes into the place. If somebody asks or at the year end or whatever the frequency, if somebody is coming and checking the records, you would be able to pull out from EduBrite that when those trainings took place and when people attended, or what was their attendance during those events. So all that would be available to you. Continuing here on a couple of more capabilities here. So one of the things which is important is the enrollment piece. So EduBrite supports system managed or automatic enrollment as well as administrator managed enrollment is supported in EduBrite. So what can happen if there are certain mandatory trainings related to 21 CFR Part 11, or if you want to make sure that whatever activities users are doing in their job or whatever trainings are relevant for them they are doing, their mandatory training, you can enroll these users into those trainings. And as part of this compliance, you will be able to then track those completion of those trainings. So whatever job, because if you take an organization like Brian was referring to, for example, pharmaceutical, there are people with a different role and each role would have a different mandatory training. So you can create that relationship I was talking to you earlier, the roles and the people, and kind of create a matrix and make sure that a specific role are enrolled into specific mandatory training automatically so that you can meet the 21 CFR compliance. So that automatic enrollment can be done. But in addition to automatic enrollment, should there a need, and then the trainer, supervisor, manager, LMS administrator, those people also have a control essentially to enroll users into the training. Some of the places it becomes important if some of the trainings are a little bit more in a nature of recurring training, and then let's say some sort of a yearly training, yearly compliance training, then you can basically set up a system in a way that once a user completes the training, it gets into their record, and automatically when the next year comes, they are enrolled into the next year's training. So for the same type of training, you can have a year-over-year record to make sure that all learners are in compliance with those training. And from the setup perspective, we do have some webinars in that area, but what I'm going to do is I'll just quickly show where some of those settings can be done. So for example, on your side, if the recurring training is enabled, then if you go inside a program, and for a program, essentially you will go through a courses and a program menu. And in this case, I am inside the program page, edit page, where I can control and make the changes. You will see that here the reattempt related settings are available. So you can allow the reattempt, you can automatically enroll into the next session, which could be like in this case, a 365 days. So it is kind of a yearly sessions. You can send the reminder notification. All those things can be set up in the EduBrite platform. Notification always becomes very important when you would like your learners to take the mandatory training or trainings that is important for you to track. And so there are multiple, there are pretty powerful notification system that sends out notification to the learners, their managers, or if you have a compliance team, they can also be a party to receive those notifications. And I've just listed a few important, mostly in context with what you would need for the 21 CFR Part 11 compliance, but you're not limited with that. So for example, if a user is enrolled into the training which are mandatory for them, no automatic notification can go out. When they complete those trainings, then notification will go out. Similarly, if they have not completed training and it's due by a certain date, then a reminder notification can go out. And this is where it becomes important. If the same reminder notification goes out to the manager also, that, hey, only 1 week is left and these are the list of the users who have not completed, then, or the training, then unnecessary follow-up can be done to make sure that a manager makes sure that their team completes those training and their team stays in compliance. And in the platform, essentially, if I go here, the pretty in the site admins, the email setting option is available, and in this email setting area, there's a lot of different settings available, but this is are the subsequent. So these are generic settings related to enabling the email settings and controlling the behavior of those trainings. For example, if you want this, if they're enrolled into training, it puts into their calendar, you can enable some of those settings. But then these are the actual notification which you can configure. So you can enable the notification that are relevant for you, and you can customize those notifications also. So if you need to override the standard template, you can override, and you can customize the messaging going out to those templates. So you have all that powerful pieces are available here. And the reminder notification also, I can just kind of quickly show you. If you are in the core session area, there is an option that you can go into the notification, and you can set up in the core session level setting that you want to send a reminder before the end of this course, 7 days before or 10 days before, whatever you would prefer. And this is where actually you can also enable that if this reminder notification needs to go out beyond anybody else who's not a learner. So those kind of controls you can use in EduBrite. Last page I have from the demonstration perspective, I'll go over some of the things pretty quickly, but I think conceptually it's important to understand that in order to meet the 21 CFR Part 11 requirement, one of the requirement is to generate an accurate and a complete report, and it should be available both in a human readable and electronic format. So the good news is that EduBrite provides a real-time reporting. So all the activities which is being performed when a learner is interacting with the platform is captured, and it's captured on a real time, and it's captured at a pretty detailed level. So of course, we do have some aggregated and a summary level reports available, but more importantly for to meeting the requirement here, the detailed report level report becomes a little bit more important compared to the aggregated level report. So for example, a tracking report, which basically there are transcript reports available, and there are many other detailed reports available, which provides the detail into learners' interaction with the platform, when did they complete it, when did they view it, those kind of things. The most importantly, it keeps the time, the track of a time. So the time tracking is kept at multiple levels. So you can see, like one of the example I was showing you, I was as a user, I was going through a Word document, few pages of that. So it keeps the tracking at that page level, or collectively that lesson of 3-page, that Word file, how much time is spent on that level, or at a course level, at overall level. So pretty helpful information available. Similarly, the same information is also maintained at the test exam level and also at the question level. Each question which is being attempted, EduBrite tracks that how much time is being spent on each of the question. I'll just quickly show you an example of this one by changing my view and going back as the end user. So let me just quickly go here, and let me just quickly take a quiz here. So one thing you can see, the moment I'm on this particular question, now it's a time tracker is enabled here. It is basically checking that how much time I'm spending on each individual question here. So that's how it goes and keeps track of it. Now at the admin side of it, if I switch my view and go to the admin side of it, then there are, for example, the course transcript reports are available. So for example, if I go here on any of these reports, you can see it's keeping, this is a course transcript report. So there are a couple of reports that are available here. First is a transcript summary. The transcript summary essentially provides the detail that the different courses this user is enrolled into, what is the related status, and how much time is being spent on each individual courses, whether they have completed in some cases, and in some cases they are not completed. So that gives kind of an overview of the overall time spent on this. And again, this can be downloaded if this needs to be downloaded, but if there is an interest in going into any specific one, look into the detail, then in that specific one, the detail can be viewed from here. So for example, you can go here, and now you can see that on each of these individual lesson within a course, how much time being spent, when was the first viewed, when was the last viewed, that kind of details are available. And this looks the same thing to me. So let me go another report which is very, very important here is what we call it activity report. So if you go here on the learning and the activity reports, and in this case you can see there are multiple activities which essentially nothing but a user's interaction with the platform for different sets of things which they are doing. So a good example is, when did they start reading a lesson, how much duration they have on the lesson, or when did the lesson is completed. So you can see as end user is interacting with the platform, EduBrite has crafted different activities and keeping track of that. And this report is available for administrator. Again, electronically it can be viewed here, can be filtered from here, or if needed, it can be downloaded and in a CSV format and can be viewed by the administrator. And all these report essentially, it contains the time stamp and the username and the content which you have interacted with, which is one of the basic requirement of that. In addition to that, one of the wonderful thing which is available in EduBrite is also an email log. So we talked about a notification just a few minutes back, and when the notification is going out from the platform, that log of that notification is also recorded. So it's not only the user's interaction is recorded in the platform, but also the notification is recorded. So you would be able to see that, Jackie has received this particular email on this date and this time, and this was the messaging of that. So that is also being recorded. And we already covered that this is available both in electronic and the PDF and CSV format. And from a modality perspective, these reports essentially, if I can take you to one of the most commonly used course enrollment reports. So of course you can come and view this report, but if there's a need to send this report, and you can download and print also, but there's a third mechanism which is available, that if you want to schedule this report and you want to send to the manager and compliance team in a certain frequency, then you can basically set that up, and accordingly they can get these reports in their inbox, so they can be fully aware of the progress which is being made by the team, what they are getting trained to. So this is primarily what I wanted to cover, Brian, from the demo perspective. I can give the control back to you.
Thank you, Manish. That was a very powerful demonstration of all the various features that are relevant to 21 CFR Part 11, and very thorough, I must add.
Thank you.
So with that, we're going to go next to our conclusion slide here, where we have some of the main takeaways. So as you can see, navigating 21 CFR Part 11 requirements can be difficult, as it has such wide scope and is open to some interpretation, and it applies differently to various industries. Since it was originally written in 1997, guidelines have come into place to better help how Part 11 should be implemented and enforced, but it still can be complex and confusing to the novice. Ultimately, it is the organization or customer that is accountable for adhering to the FDA regulations, not the software or hardware vendor. They need to the organization needs to do a risk assessment and determine the requirements that the quality and IT departments can agree to, and then enforce and then use those to determine the best solution against those requirements. So validation is an extensive effort and a huge block of the project timeline, often taking from 3 to 6 months, requiring resources from multiple departments. I believe next we have a few questions from our attendees. So if we can go to the Q&A section here. Manish and AJ, if you could take a look at those and see what we have that we can answer.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the couple of questions which are here posted in the question area. One is related to the because EduBrite supports the different customizations and provide a personalized experience. So the question is in that related, that what happens if the EduBrite is customized, then how does it affect what we have demonstrated so far? So yeah, so from the backend perspective or from the end user experience, most of the things which I demonstrated are more like the policies and the setups, which essentially are not impacted by the customization or user experience. So for example, if you have set up a password policy, no matter what kind of customized experience you have provided, those password policies would still be enforced. If user is interacting with the platform, maybe their look and feel is personalized, or some of only, maybe they're only using for self-paced learning or ILT or both, whatever be the scenario, that kind of exposure is given. But in the back end, EduBrite is capturing all the details. So essentially, it would not have any impact. All the different capabilities that Edu provides essentially would be available to the customer.
Thank you. Anything else that we have in there that we should answer?
Yeah, there's another question regarding that if there are more details available to this 21 CFR Part 11 and EduBrite. So yeah, so feel free to contact us, and if there are any specific requirements you may have, we'll be happy to share more details on that particular thing.
Great. All righty then. With that, we'll go to our next slide here. Stay connected. So as Ajay mentioned, we have the user community where you can take advantage of learning from other community members, as well as connect with the EduBrite support team. And also on the events page or events section, you can see upcoming events like this one, as well as recordings of this one and any previous ones. There's also extensive support tools available on the EduBrite University at support.edubrite.com, and a vast array of video tutorials on all of the components of SuccessX, including open learning, knowledge base. There's a webinar channel and a lot of frequently asked questions that might have some similar aspects to what you might have. And then our release notes, if you want to be up to speed on what our new features are and enhancements, you can also view those and subscribe to our release notes. And then we also have a blog at blog.edubrite.com where Ajay speaks to the industry and how EduBrite is addressing current events and current scenarios. And you can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter at EduBrite. So with that, Ajay, Manish, anything else that we want to cover today?
No, I'm good. Thank you very much, Brian. Thank you. Appreciate wonderful.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Manish. Nice webinar. And thanks everyone for joining. We hope to see you in the next session.
So here on the events section, you can see that we just finished this one. This will be recorded very shortly. And our next one is Design Effective Sales Enablement Training, and that's on February 27th, also at 11 PST. So we encourage you to enroll for that. And we're going to talk about how sales professionals can be trained with a sales enablement perspective. So we could even do some observational assessments where we can actually show how a salesperson can do a pitch, for example. So that's coming up on the 27th.